Welcome back to Cross-Strait Chronicles. We turn complex cross-strait history into stories you can actually enjoy. Grab a seat, relax, and let's travel back in time, across the strait. Last episode, we explored the Boxer Rebellion, a movement fueled by fear, anger, and a desperate desire to push foreign powers out of China. The Boxers believed in spiritual invincibility. They believed bullets couldn't hurt them. Unfortunately, bullets did not share that belief. The Qing court made a gamble, supporting the Boxers against the Eight-Nation Alliance. The result? Beijing fell. Cixi fled. China paid an enormous indemnity. Foreign troops marched through the capital, and the Qing dynasty, already weak, was now internationally embarrassed and financially crippled. So here's the twist. After resisting reform for decades, after crushing the 100 Days Reform, after backing a disastrous anti-foreign uprising, the Qing court suddenly said, perhaps we should modernize. Ah, yes. Now, today's episode begins not with confidence, but with humiliation. Segment 1. The shock that changed everything. The Boxer Protocol of 1901 was brutal. China agreed to pay 450 million taels of silver, plus interest, because, of course, there was interest. Allow foreign troops to be stationed in Beijing. Punish officials who had supported the Boxers. Destroy forts. Issue formal apologies. In short, sovereignty slightly dented. But humiliation can do something interesting to governments. It can break them, or it can force them to change. And this time, even Empress Dowager Cixi seemed to understand something important. If we do not reform ourselves, someone else will reform us, probably with cannons. Segment 2. Cixi's unexpected transformation. Now let's pause for a moment. Cixi, the same woman who crushed reform in 1898, the same woman who supported the Boxers, the same conservative power figure for decades, suddenly became pro-reform? History loves irony. After fleeing to Xi'an during the Boxer crisis, Cixi began receiving reports. She saw how weak China's military really was. She saw how powerful industrialized nations had become. She saw how outdated Qing institutions were. And perhaps most importantly, she realized the dynasty might not survive another disaster. So in 1901, she launched what we now call the late Qing reforms, or the new policies, Xinjiang. And this time, they were serious. Segment 3. The military makeover. First target, the army. Because if you can't defend yourself, none of the other reforms matter. The Qing began building a modernized military modeled after Japan and Germany. Enter Yuan Shikai. Yes, that Yuan Shikai. He had already been developing the Beiyang Army, one of the most modern, disciplined forces in China. Western training, modern rifles, professional officer corps. For the first time, China had something resembling a national modern army. But here's the catch. It was loyal not to an abstract constitution, not to the dynasty. It was loyal to Yuan Shikai. And that detail will matter very soon. Segment 4. Goodbye, Imperial Exams. Now, this next reform shocked everyone. In 1905, the Qing court abolished the imperial examination system. Let that sink in. For over 1,300 years, the Confucian exam system had been the backbone of Chinese governance. It shaped elites. It defined education. It structured ambition. And now, gone. Why? Because memorizing Confucian classics was not helping China build railways, or manage modern finance, or understand international law, or design artillery. New schools were established. Students were sent abroad, especially to Japan. Western subjects were introduced: science, engineering, law. The intellectual world shifted almost overnight, but rapid change creates identity crises. If Confucian exams no longer defined status, then what did? And who belonged at the top? Segment 5, A Promise of Constitutional Government. Now we get to the most dramatic reform: political reform. In 1906, the Qing court announced it would move toward constitutional monarchy. Yes, like Japan. The plan: draft a constitution, establish provincial assemblies, eventually create a national parliament. In 1909, provincial assemblies were formed. Local elites could now debate budgets, discuss policy, criticize officials. It was limited, but it was new. For the first time in Imperial Chinese history, structured political participation expanded beyond the court. People were talking about representation, rights, nationhood, and once people taste political voice, it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle. Segment 6, Modernization Everywhere. The reforms didn't stop there. Legal system restructured, police forces modernized, infrastructure expanded, railways developed, new ministries created. China was transforming at a speed that would have been unimaginable just 10 years earlier. It almost felt like a national sprint. The problem? The ground beneath them was cracking. Segment 7, Too fast or too slow? Here's the paradox. The Qing had waited too long to reform. Now they were reforming too fast. Conservatives felt disoriented. Scholars felt displaced. Commoners faced rising taxes to pay indemnities and reform costs. Officials scrambled to adapt. And meanwhile, revolutionary groups were growing. Sun Yat-sen and other activists were no longer arguing for reform. They were arguing for revolution, because in their eyes, the Qing had already lost legitimacy. Reform under the Qing was like renovating a collapsing house. Impressive effort, but the foundation was unstable. Segment 8, The Railway Crisis. Now we arrive at the final trigger. Railways were symbols of modernization, but they required massive funding. To finance construction and pay foreign debts, the Qing government nationalized local railway projects in 1911. Local investors were furious. Provincial elites felt betrayed. Merchants felt robbed. Protests erupted, especially in Sichuan. The railway protection movement exploded, and when the government tried to suppress protests, troops were deployed, which weakened military presence elsewhere, which created opportunity in Wuchang. Segment 9, 1911. The Spark, October 10th, 1911. A bomb accidentally exploded in Wuchang. Revolutionaries were exposed. They panicked and decided, well, we might as well start the revolution now. The Wuchang uprising began. One province declared independence, then another, then another. Within weeks, the Qing dynasty, after 268 years, was unraveling. All those reforms, they were happening, but they were happening inside a system that people no longer trusted. Segment 10, The Final Irony. Here is the tragedy. The Qing dynasty finally understood the need for change. They modernized the army. They reformed education. They promised constitutional rule. They opened political space. If these reforms had started in the 1860s, perhaps survival was possible. If they had continued the 100 Days reform, perhaps stability could have been built. But reform delayed becomes reform destabilizing. Because when expectations rise faster than trust, revolution feels closer than patience. In 1912, the last emperor, Puyi, abdicated. The Republic of China was born, and Yuan Shikai, commander of the modern army built during the reforms, became the key broker of power. History has a sense of humor, sometimes a dark one. The late Qing reforms were bold, ambitious, and transformative. They reshaped the military, education, politics, law infrastructure. They dismantled 1,300 years of exam tradition. They introduced constitutional ideas. They modernized the state. But they came after decades of hesitation, humiliation, and mistrust. And by the time reform arrived, too many people had already decided the dynasty had to go. Change finally came, but it could not save the Qing. Now, here's a question for you. Do you think the Qing dynasty could have survived if these reforms had begun earlier? Or was the fall inevitable once foreign pressure and internal weakness reached a certain point? Was the dynasty a victim of bad timing or bad decisions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you see it. If this video helped make Cross-Strait history a little less confusing, consider giving it a like and subscribing. History is complicated, but learning it doesn't have to be. Next episode, we move into the birth of the Republic and the power struggles that followed. I'll see you in the next episode.